All right, we're going to get started. And so thanks again to everyone for joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Heald, and I'm the president and CEO of the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation. And I'm just so delighted today to be moderating this very important discussion. Before I provide you with a bit of background on today's event, we want to start by acknowledging that the land on which we broadcast this meeting today is the land traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. And we also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land. We also would like to acknowledge the significant contributions and accomplishments of many Indigenous people in our community. I have learned so much this year about the history and the key issues facing Indigenous peoples today. I know I still have so much to learn. I and members of our team are enrolling on various online Indigenous courses over the winter, and there's so many amazing resources available to the public. So I encourage you, if you want to continue your learning journey around truth and reconciliation, please invest the time in finding and utilizing those resources. This afternoon, we're here for the second in a three-part series focused on affordable housing and homelessness in Waterloo Region. Partners from across Waterloo Region have come together to share information and convene conversations about an issue that is a region-wide priority affecting all residents. Today's topic is innovative approaches to affordable housing in Waterloo Region, and is focused on the innovative approaches that are being used to address affordable housing needs in our community. Over the next hour, you will learn about ideas from our communities and find out how everyone can get involved in making a difference for people in Waterloo Region. To start, I wanted to just share a little bit about a new initiative that we've launched in March called the Housing Innovation Roundtable. So in early 2020, it was actually a very auspicious start. It was March 11th was our first meeting, which was the day the pandemic was announced. So KWCF convened a collaborative, innovative roundtable with representatives from the public sector, the private sector, and the philanthropic sector in an effort to catalyze impact in two areas of the housing continuum: affordable rental housing and affordable home ownership. So together, this partnership formed the Housing Innovation Roundtable to do really three things: to foster and inspire innovation in affordable rental housing and affordable home ownership, to convene thought leadership, and to encourage, facilitate, and test collaborative, innovative approaches to addressing housing inequities. The Housing Innovation Roundtable is focused on collaborative action and applied research and learning methods. By June 2020, we had identified several potential experiments that built on both the skill sets within the roundtable, as well as the needs and opportunities in our community as we saw it. We have been somewhat organic in the nature of our process, moving between really big picture systems discussions, and then also exploring very specific interventions. One of the strengths of this group is the ability to move between the two very easily, and to challenge each other on where our focus should be placed. So the diverse participants and perspectives around this Innovation Roundtable also ensure that our actions and interventions are balanced and that we maintain a real positive tension between advocacy and action. So thank you for allowing me to share a little bit about the Housing Innovation Roundtable, but I have talked long enough. So without further ado, I'd like to now introduce our speakers. Our panel consists of some amazing leaders in our community: Sean Campbell, who's the founding member and coordinator of Union Co-operative. Sean is also a member of the Housing Innovation Roundtable that I mentioned. Nadine Green, who is the on-site leader for a Better Tent City that I'm sure many of you have heard a lot about over the last number of months. Andrew Ramsaroop, who's the engagement and program manager of affordable housing strategy for the city of Kitchener, and Mark Willcock, community engagement coordinator for Waterloo Region at Indwell. So as I mentioned, in the essence of time, we've been sharing their incredible bios in the chat function. So please take a look to learn a bit more. We're also thrilled to be joined by Leilani Farha, Global Director of The Shift and former UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Housing. Leilani, if some of you were able to join us last fall when we had a private screening of a movie that featured Leilani. She was the lead orchestrator and star in this movie, and it was called Push, and it was about individuals that are pushed out or of their housing, or another word would be renovictions. Leilani has a vast knowledge on this topic, and I'm going to ask Leilani to join me on screen now so we can start off the conversation. So hi, Leilani. Thanks so much for joining. And so before we jump into the real, focused on Waterloo Region and some of the innovations that we're seeing here, I know you have a vast perspective of global interventions, and I'm just wondering, I'd love to hear a little bit about, what are you seeing in other parts of the world, or what have you seen, and some examples of some innovative solutions.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Elizabeth, for convening this, and thanks to everyone for showing up, even on such a crazy day as today, post-US election. I just want to say before I launch into my comments that I am situated right now in Ottawa, and I live on what are in fact Anishinaabe lands. I live really close to what's called the Ottawa River, but it used to be called the Kitchener-Waterloo River. And I have a dog who you may hear from in a few minutes. He barks incessantly. So I walk along the Kitchener-Waterloo River or the Ottawa River every morning with my dog. That river used to be a convening place. On both sides of the river, Anishinaabe would meet and fish and sort of have community. And that river now divides Ontario and Quebec, and it divides us in terms of language, in terms of religion, and in terms of politics. So you see I live the colonial history, every day I walk by and I'm looking across at Quebec, at this other land, and the river acts as this divisive thing rather than a place of communion. So I always try to remember that when I'm walking with my dog. I thought I would share that with you. So it's the day after the official US election day. And I think we have a lot to dwell on. And I think, believe it or not, that election has got me thinking a lot about what I wanted to sort of start by saying to you this morning about human rights, or this afternoon, I guess. If you look at the US right now, in this moment, what is being exposed through a whole slew of statistics is a very divided country, actually very equally divided country. And a country, I think, and with due respect to my friends down south, I've worked extensively in the US and I have a ton of amazing colleagues and friends, but it is a society that is so based in inequality of income, inequality based on race, ethnicity, ancestry, place of origin. And from my vantage point as someone who's worked in the area of human rights all of my working life, I can say that what I love about human rights is it should and can bring us all together. It helps to erase those divisions. And it's not to say that it, excuse the expression, whitewashes us all, quite the contrary. It recognizes our difference, but binds us together in our mutual dignity. And human rights at their essence is about the human family and how we are all joined together through human dignity and security. And that's actually so much related, or so related to housing. So I want you to think for a moment about people who are living in homelessness, whether it's on a sidewalk, in a tent, in a shelter, in temporary housing, couch surfing, etc. You think of that person or those persons, and many of them will have lack of access to, a shower and a toilet. And in my experience, what I notice most about in all of my interactions with people living in homelessness is that they are clinging to human dignity. And we make it really hard for people living in homelessness to have their dignity, because we're depriving them of the essentials that are required for dignity. And if you also think about people living in rental accommodation, renting an apartment, and suddenly their rent goes up, an above guideline increase, and suddenly can't pay the rent, not sure how you're going to pay the rent. And then suddenly there's a pandemic and you lose your job and you really don't know how you're going to pay your rent. And you know the eviction moratorium is being lifted. The lack of security there is palpable, and we're seeing that across the country. If you look at those two examples I've given you, whether it's homelessness or housing precarity, what is at stake in both cases is dignity and security. Those are human rights issues. That's where I started my comments. And when we're confronted with human rights matters, I think we have a responsibility to respond with human rights. And so for me, it just simply makes sense to understand housing as a human right, as essential for human dignity, and to respond with human rights. And this is happening around the world. And I don't want to go on too long, so I'm going to give you two really concrete examples, one homegrown and one from Europe. So in Berlin, we're seeing amazing things happen. And it's a lovely interaction between residents of Berlin and legislators of the city of Berlin. So tenants have taken to the streets en masse, saying they have a very financialized housing system. In other words, a lot of big investors going in and putting pressure on the housing system. And rents are escalating, homelessness is escalating, and tenants are saying enough. They took to the streets by the thousands and they demanded that there be a rent freeze. This is pre-pandemic time. This is not a rent freeze in the context of an emergency. This is rent freeze in the context of a housing crisis. And they demanded a 5-year, well, they wanted longer, a 7-year rent freeze. The legislature at city level responded and fashioned a 5-year rent freeze legislation that has now been challenged in the courts and has won every step of the way right to the highest court and now is good law. And so tenants are now protected. They have rent stabilization for 5 years, a freeze for 5 years. The tenants also demanded that any landlord that owns more than 3,000 units, that those units be expropriated from the institutional owner and be converted to social housing. And they're in the midst of really making that a reality. They haven't won that yet. They won their first referendum on that, and they're going to continue to go. They also managed to secure a rent cap on new builds. So there's actually a formula, which I won't go into, a mathematical equation. It's a little boring, but if you're living in a new build and your rent is higher than that formula, you can go and apply and have your rent lowered so that is actually an affordable rent. These are all amazing. But what I love about it is the people take to the streets, they make their claims, and the legislators respond. That's the kind of interaction that really works and can lead to great results. The other example I'll give you is from Montreal, homegrown. I just heard they're passing this bylaw tomorrow, Thursday, and this is a 25-25-25 bylaw, basically where any new build occurs, those new builds have to accommodate 25% social housing, 25% deeply affordable housing, and 25% affordable housing. Now, we'll see how it actually gets passed through the bylaw and whether it gets, changed at all. But that's very innovative use of a bylaw power to ensure the affordability of housing, as well as I said, deeply affordable and social housing. And that's just at city level. That's not engaging the province and not engaging the national level government. So I'll stop there. I've talked too long, but I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm gonna turn my video off, but I'm gonna be listening to all of the interventions, and I'll join you at the end.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Leilani. And we have Andrew from the city of Kitchener on, who, so if the panelists want to turn on their videos and now, and so Andrew, you might be asked to respond to that a little bit later with regards to could the city of Kitchener do something similar. So we have, as I mentioned, we have Sean Campbell, we have Nadine Green. So Nadine, if you want to turn on your camera now, that would be great. And Andrew and Mark. I'm just going to give Nadine a minute to do that. But just so you know, we can hear you, just can't see you yet. So I'm just going to say while you're doing that, we have 163 participants on. So so no pressure for this conversation, but I'm just, you know, there's a lot of content to get through today. So let's just jump right into the questions. And as I mentioned, our hope at the end is to leave some time to open up for questions from the audience. So please feel free to use the Q&A function, and I'll try to keep an eye on that and on the panelists. So thank you all for joining. So the first question is for all of you. So please provide 1 or 2 examples of innovative approaches to affordable housing that are being done or are available to be accessed in Waterloo Region right now. So I'm just going to go the order that people are on my screen. So Andrew, if could you just jump in, just sort of 2 to 3 minutes each, just share a little bit of some things that perhaps other people don't know about.
Sure, yeah. So I've been in talks with Sandy from One Roof, and their project with modular housing around youth experiencing homelessness is a really cool project that I'm really looking into. And what their goal is with enough funding and enough support that they're hoping to eradicate youth homelessness in Waterloo Region. It's a really lofty project, and I think it'll serve 2 purposes. Number one, that if we equip youth with the tools that they need to live more independently later on in life, it'll have a lot more downstream effects with an upstream solution. And then second of all, that modular housing can and, you know, will be cheaper to build, but also be aesthetically pleasing, just as normal builds are. So I'm really watching that carefully, and I'm really excited for the work that they're doing.
Awesome, that's a great example. Thanks, Andrew. Nadine. Just
hello, how are you?
Hi, nice to see you. Maybe just 1 or 2 examples. I know, you know, a better tent city is certainly an innovation, but is there something else that you've seen in Waterloo Region that you want to share about innovation, or a little bit about a better tent city?
Okay, at the better tent city here, if we get more homes, because now we have 24 houses, if we get probably maybe 50 more homes, we can have more people here. And there are a lot of older people who are experiencing homelessness, people in their 50s, 40s, 50s. So if we can have more homes, we will have more homes here at Lot 42 to accommodate those people.
Mm-hmm. What's one of the,
So
I want to go off script a little bit with you just for a second. And so I'm just wondering, what's one of the things you've seen that's really just been a real, you know, eye opener for you since moving to the location you're at now and having these new structures? You know, what's sort of the one thing that's jumped out to you that was really key in this relationship?
Just seeing how happy the guys are to be here, and just seeing the smile on their face and the gratefulness, and hearing thank you, Nadine, because of you people are being nice to us, because of you we're eating better, because of you we feel loved. Just hearing that is amazing.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Nadine, and thanks for the work you do there.
Thank you.
Mark, a couple of innovations, 1 or 2.
1 or 2, sure. Well, I'll focus on 1, I guess. Just take the full time to focus on 1, I think, just because I'm really appreciative of what the House of Friendship is doing, and it that's what stands out to me right now is what the House of Friendship is doing with their shelter care model that they've just launched. And I know they've been in the news a lot recently, and rightfully so, really. They've hit on something that I think is so impactful on the lives of those that they serve, particularly around the goal of seeing their participants move from homelessness to permanent housing. And that is this idea of bringing together healthcare and shelter together on site under one roof. And so recently, John Neufeld, who's the executive director, and Jessica Bondi, who is the Housing Services Director. They talk about this in much greater detail on the House of Friendship YouTube channel. They recently did an update called Sweet Beginnings, and talked about having this place where they can support their tenants. Shelter care is all about where they can have a place to support their participants 24/7 with needed medical care and associated services on site, and that's made a huge difference for them. And they kind of talk about the journey to getting there, beginning when COVID hit back in March. And Jessica, I think, talked about panicking productively, is what she said, and moving from this warehouse model of providing a bed and a meal, as they did on their Charles Street site, to a model where they now people are moved into individual or shared rooms with 1 or 2 people, beginning at the Radisson, and then now they're at the Tower at the Inn of Waterloo in North Waterloo with on-site medical care and harm reduction support and other services. And that's literally been life-changing for their participants. And I'm just gonna look at my note for a second here, because I wanna make sure I get these 3 stats right that they've mentioned more than once that that has really made an impact. When they talk about the fact that since they've gone to this model, overdoses have gone down, have been reduced by 50%, emergency medical visits have been reduced by 75%, and 56 of the men that they've seen come through their shelter have been permanently housed in the last 6 months and haven't come back. They've stayed housed, which is incredible. And so having this model where participants come to the shelter, they have a place to stay and are supported and helped in navigating the housing system to find permanent housing of some kind is innovative, because people across the country are asking them about it. And most importantly, it's life-changing for the participants in their shelter. And that's happening right here in Waterloo Region.
Fantastic, great example. Thanks, Mark. And you managed to mention one roof, under one roof in that, which tied in with Andrew talking about one roof, which was kind of interesting. Sean, over to you. 1 or 2 examples of innovative approaches in Waterloo.
Sure. I had the opportunity to speak with Dan from Menno Homes before our chat today, and Dan's actually on the call here. Menno Homes is working on a new project on Bridgeport in Waterloo. It will have 48 residential units, and they're working on the 5th floor right now. So it's coming along, and hopefully they'll have occupancy by August of 2021. One of the things I think is really exciting about this project is that they form partnerships with existing charities and housing organizations in town. So Menno Homes has been developing this expertise and capacity in terms of constructing affordable housing. And now they're able to provide a happy home for other organizations who are supporting people in need. And that includes Parents for Community Living, Mennonite Coalition for Refugee Support, and Thresholds Homes and Support. Another innovative piece that they partnered with a church who owns the property. And the church realized that they could have a really big impact in their community and advance their values by constructing this tower on the site. So the church was actually able to, or will be able to stay. The main floor will have worship space as well as a commercial kitchen for programming. So the church is getting an updated location, and they're able to have this really fantastic impact in the community. If you are interested in getting involved, I know we may talk about that later on, but Menno Homes is doing a capital campaign right now, so you can check that out on their website at mennohomes.com.
Fantastic. That's great, Sean, and a great little plug in there at the end too. So thank you. So Leilani mentioned some ideas, one in Berlin and one in Montreal. Are there any innovative projects related to affordable housing and homelessness that you've seen elsewhere, either elsewhere in Canada or globally, that you think might be useful for us to consider in Waterloo Region? And I'll just let anybody who wants to answer that jump in.
I can go first.
Thanks, Andrew.
So while it's not a new idea, I think it's certainly an innovative approach, but using community land trusts is a really interesting idea. It's been around since the 60s and 70s and the 80s, and it kind of died off in use. But looking at what they can accomplish by taking out the value of the land and the value of the building, taking it out of the market, and ultimately making it affordable in perpetuity is incredible. So I have some stats here. The Burlington Community Land Trust, which started under Bernie Sanders in the States, is now valued at $144 million and houses more than 6,000 people. We all probably know the Toronto Island. It is a land trust in and of itself, and it has a wide variety of people living there of different incomes. In BC, the Community Land Trust, in partnership with the City of Vancouver, saw a huge increase from 275 homes in 2017 to more than 2,600 homes in 2019. So I'm looking at this and I'm trying to figure it out. Like, I'm not an expert in community land trusts, but you know, realizing why they kind of went out and realizing how they can be realized again as a vehicle or a tool for securing affordable housing. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, really interesting. Sean, do you want to jump in on that?
I was actually going to talk about something similar. So the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust in Toronto just formed a partnership with the Van City Community Investment Bank, which is part of the Van City Credit Union, to create the Preserve and Protect Guarantee Program. So it's a fast response loan fund that will be able to allow the land trust to purchase properties really quickly when it comes up. And it was invested in by the Atkinson, Metcalf, Echo, and Fairmont Foundation. So it's a really interesting example there, and something that I think we might be able to replicate here in the community. And I think we'll have the opportunity to talk a bit more after about our own initiatives, but certainly for Union Co-op, what we're looking to do is to create a local community land trust. So Andrew, it'd be great to chat more about that after too.
Yeah, fantastic. Those are great examples for sure. Mark.
So one of the things one project that has caught our attention at Indwell is something called a seniors co-housing model that's coming to light, as some of our tenants across the province are starting to age in place with us. This has kind of piqued our interest, and we're talking about it a little bit just as an example. So the co-housing model that we're seeing in Canada and other places in Canada and in Ontario as well is this idea of offering seniors independence and with a sense of community and tailored amenities, but it also keeps the housing costs affordable and care services accessible for them. So this idea of co-housing that we've, in terms of researching, seen this definition that it generally, I'm just going to read this definition that we've come across, refers to an intentional self-built community wherein residents maintain private dwellings that are centered around communal spaces and services that are tailored to meet their specific needs. And so what's a little unique about this, we think, as we're sort of looking into it, is that these models are community-led. So it's collectively designed and collectively planned and owned and managed by the residents themselves. So particularly for seniors, allows seniors to age in place while still getting the support they need, but also pairs them with some living space, but also having common facilities and shared services. As well, it also allows them in a number of cases to continue to build equity so they can still maintain some sense of both financial and personal independence while they age in place. So that's one model that we've been looking at a little bit, called co-housing, particularly in the areas of seniors, as our some of our residents are starting to age in place, and we're beginning to, think about what that would look like.
Yeah, really interesting. Is that Abbeyfield? Is that the model that you're talking about, or is there another one? Because we also got a presentation on Abbeyfield. I know they're looking to do their first place in
sorry. Yeah, no.
We'll talk offline about that.
Sure,
I was curious if it was Abbeyfield. Yeah, that's awesome.
That's fine.
Nadine, do you want to anything that you've heard of around housing and homelessness in other areas of the province or the country or globally that you think would be inspiring for us to look at and investigate here?
I haven't really heard of anything, but I think they should have another location for more tiny homes like what we have here at Lot 42. That would be a good idea.
That's great. And I think someone was asking something about tiny homes in the chat too. So maybe we'll get to a broader conversation about that in a little bit. How many units do you have now, Nadine, at the Better Tent City?
So now we have 24 houses, and we still have people tenting inside. So we have some tents inside, and the people inside are still waiting for more houses, and we're getting 7 more homes coming. So the people inside will be moving outside.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That really interesting. Thank you, Nadine.
Yes. Thank you.
We're going to just move on to the next question, and this is for Mark. So how are the opinions and needs of those who will be living in the affordable housing spaces we create or preserve being included in the solutions we are developing?
Yeah, so I'm really happy to answer this question because it really speaks to the heart of what we do at Indwell. And at Indwell, we're always trying to learn and grow in how we serve our tenants. And so, yeah, this speaks directly to how we do what we do. So Indwell, particularly, we build affordable housing with supports with the goal of our tenants finding health, wellness, and belonging. So whether we're building a new building from the ground up or whether we're repurposing an existing building like we're going to be doing here in Kitchener, because we're not just the developers and the ones who do the construction, we also will be the program providers for our tenants. We have them in mind when we build our buildings from the beginning. So our project and developments team is matched up with our program and health team so that our buildings are designed with our tenants in mind. So for example, most of the tenants that will live in our buildings won't have cars. Many of them will have bicycles. So when we design our buildings, we design them with ample indoor bike storage that's bright, well lit, has space where they can store their bikes and repair their bikes. Another example is that in our buildings, we design our on-site laundry facilities so that they are in bright, well-lit spaces. When I think of when I've lived in an apartment building, sometimes the laundry rooms are in the corner of the basement or they're not well lit, and sometimes I don't feel safe. We want our tenants to feel safe in our buildings, and it might be a trigger for some of our tenants. So we want them to feel safe even when they're doing their laundry. 2/3 of our tenants typically have a mental health issue. So we build our buildings with a lot of natural light to provide brightness in general. Another thing we do is we build our houses starting as of 2016 to Passive House standards so that our buildings are highly energy efficient, but more important, it reduces our carbon footprint, but most importantly to us, it also adds to the utility savings for our tenants. So it keeps the cost of utilities really low and consistent throughout the year. And so we have our tenants in mind for that. In terms of solutions, we've also started doing a tenant survey every year where we get feedback from our tenants on how we're doing and in terms of what programming we're offering, and could we, it helps us to improve each building that we build and what programming we offer for our tenants. It's because we want them to find stability in housing and a measure of recovery and growth. Each building that we have, because we have a number of buildings across Ontario, each building is a little bit different and offers slightly different programming solutions for our tenants depending on who they are. And so, for example, in one of our buildings is in more of a rural location. And so we've been able to actually build a community garden that the tenants had a say in starting. They wanted to have some programming around food. They loved meeting around food and how could we grow our food? So, well, let's start a community garden. So we did that in conjunction with the local food bank in that city and another local charity that helped to find the funds to build the community garden and teach our tenants how to grow food, and then also have a sense of giving back to the community. So a lot of the food that's grown is given back to the food bank in the area. So our tenants had a large say in that. And then lastly, I'll just add, as I end it, before our tenants even move into the building, our director of projects and development actually spends a number of days and nights living in the building himself before tenants move in to get a sense of what the tenants will experience in the building, ensure that everything's working, that you see how the space functions and flows, so that our tenants get the best possible experience from the get-go. So just kind of wrap up by saying that really, to answer this question, that how we build and what services and programming we provide begins with our tenants in mind, and the tenants that will be serving and are included in our thinking and design process, as well as follow-up and opportunities after the building is built and tenants are in for feedback to adjust how we do, and just ultimately in the goal so we're serving our tenants better.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I know you do amazing work, and there was a comment from Louise in one of our sister organizations in Woodstock in Oxford County that mentioned the project there. So check out her comment, Mark, in the chat. But Nadine, this question's for you. And so it's around, how has COVID-19 impacted innovation related to affordable housing and homelessness. And also, I mean, a follow-up question that has been in the chat, which I know is on a number of people's minds, is now that lot 42 property is up for sale. So what does that mean for a better tent city?
Yeah, okay, so it's up for sale, and if it gets sold, we're still here till July next year. So like we're still good till July, and hopefully whoever buys the property can still keep us here, and I hope they will. And as for the first questions about what you asked about COVID-19, because of COVID-19, it opened the doors for us to be here at Lot 42. Because as you know, Lot 42 is a venue where they had parties, functions. And if it wasn't for COVID-19, then we wouldn't be here. And that's how it came about, us being at Lot 42. Not that I'm saying, it's not like it's not good that people are dying of COVID-19, but it also helps the people on the other spectrum, the people who are homeless, get to be in a spot like Lot 42, where there's no function, there's nothing going on, and we can get to be here and have a better tent city on this land.
Yeah, really good point, Nadine.
Yeah.
And so that's really great to hear that you're going to be able to stay until July, and then as other options may come available. So as people are also thinking about online, how can you help? Certainly, if other opportunities that you know of for land comes across, I'm sure Nadine would be happy to chat with you about that. Andrew, so what are the barriers to innovation, and how can these barriers be addressed or removed?
Yeah, so as Nadine said, COVID-19, it's not a good thing, but it's really affected the first two barriers that I have listed here: political will and social climate. So, through our strategic plan or strategic planning, care and community came up as a major theme. And the affordable housing strategy was one of the projects that was being delivered off from that strategic plan. So I think we have the social climate to say that we have residents willing to support this, and that's really important because you really need champions of an idea. And there's also political will. We have a council who's really, really supportive of the work that we're doing and are really good advocates and spokespeople for this project and plan. So that's really good. And other things that we face as barriers are time, funds, and resources, of course. And then lack of spaces for collaboration. So I think what we've kind of focused on with our advisory committee is taking a huge swath of the population and basically saying, let's work together. Let's work from top to bottom to top, and across silos. So even looking inwards at our organization and saying, how can we reach out and use our local homegrown expertise? That's crucial in this time. You need kind of a collective action and a collective will. Also meaningful engagement. So I think that we have to be engaging with those who are the most affected, those who are most inequitably facing housing vulnerabilities, and hearing exactly what their main concerns are. And, I think far too long, from what I've heard, is, people who've been advocating in this field for about 20 years or more have been saying, we've been saying what's wrong. And, this is the first time that we're actually hearing someone, seeing someone hear us and write down what we've been saying. So that's been really great. And another thing is data. I think more people need to commit to collecting more data on those who are most vulnerable, and that includes race-based data, data on Indigenous peoples, people with disabilities, whether it's cognitive, acquired, or physical. Those are some areas that we're lacking, and LGBTQ+ as well, because we all experience housing vulnerability different, and I think that's really important. Despite all these barriers, I think that the housing strategy has been able to innovate in some pretty cool ways. So first and foremost, building upon what Leilani said at the very beginning, the housing strategy is not only mentioning housing as human rights, it's actually the backdrop and the foundation as to which we're looking at this. We're using it as a lens, as well as equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-Black racism, and the work around Indigenous peoples and the history behind that. It's really important that we look at that and look at everything and question how we plan things in the city, and looking at things that we have as biases as well. We're also hoping through this process to amplify the voices of those with lived experience, and that is to have a committee of majority lived experience persons who will be there to mark the success. And that's one of the actions in our strategy as well. And I think the most important part is meaningful compensation. So valuing, I think we traditionally value education and traditional education, but there's a lot to say, and people with lived experience have a lot of good ideas. So it's removing that barrier to participation, I think, is going to be key to our future innovation. I have other things here, like a coordinated ask with our local nonprofits, leveraging the strategic use of city lands for modular supportive housing, and our new Make It Kitchener 2.0 economic development plan puts housing as a pillar within their plan. So that's pretty interesting to look at economic development and housing and how can we recover back in a more equitable manner. So those are some of the cool ways that we're looking at innovation. And of course, inclusionary zoning. That's a huge tool that we're investigating with the cities of Waterloo and Cambridge. And it's pretty impressive how far we are in comparison to the rest of the municipalities in Ontario. I think we're probably neck and neck with the city of Toronto, if not ahead of them. So lots of good innovation coming from this. And I hope that there's more to come in the next 5 years while we implement this.
Congratulations. Certainly the city of Kitchener has had some really exciting announcements lately, last week around the new Make It Kitchener 2.0, is that what it's, and so congratulations. Not always does innovation and cities go hand in hand, just teasing, but it's really exciting to see what's coming out of the city of Kitchener and others. Mark was mentioning about light and the lighting in the places in Indwell. Well, I don't know what's going on. I did close my blinds and I still feel like so I'm going to try to fix that. But before I do that, I'm just going to turn the last question over to Sean, and then we're going to go to the questions in the audience. So Sean, innovation involves taking a risk. So what suggestions do you have to manage the risk while still maximizing positive outcomes?
Yeah, I think it's important to be realistic. If it was easy, somebody would have done it already. Doing something for the first time is slow, it's expensive, it carries risks, and it also often includes a lot of partners. So for us, working in the housing space here, or the social sector more broadly, there's a lot of different partners and parties at play. Each partner has their own rules and strategies and priorities. So it's trying to find that happy middle ground that you're able to maximize that. I think, for us at Union Co-op, we know that we think we're the first people in Canada to create this co-op structure where folks can invest in the co-op like you would with the renewable energy co-op and use those funds to acquire existing properties to keep them affordable and in community control. So although we're the first to do this, we've been able to learn from a lot of other organizations that have done things like community bonds or renewable energy co-ops, some different actions happening down in the US. So that's one form of de-risking, is learn from the experience of others. We've also been able to participate in the KW Community Foundation's Housing Innovation Roundtable, which has been really important for providing feedback and gaining insights from people with a lot more experience than us. So that's been helpful. And partnering with different groups, so including our housing partner, Reception House. We were very successful and we're very grateful for the support from the National Housing Strategy, which is administered by CMHC. And that's provided us some more capacity as well. So to Andrew's point before, that funding is often a really important piece for de-risking. So you're able to take that time and bring in those experts that often aren't cheap. We are also working with researchers at the University of Waterloo, at the Waterloo Institute for Social Innovation and Resilience, and at Conestoga College as well. So bringing that external expertise and their great capacity has been helpful. And then the last two pieces, we have our members, and our members all have different backgrounds and different expertise professionally and personally that they can bring in, and that's been very helpful. And the last piece I'd say is just take your time and plan. And once you have it all written down, you're able to share that with others and they can poke holes in it, and it can hurt the ego sometimes, but it's helpful in the long run.
Fantastic. And I know you've got quite a large number of partners already at the cooperative. And so maybe if you want to share in the chat as well, how people can get connected, if that's something that you're still interested, or find out more about Union, that would be helpful. I'm going to turn to some questions. There's a few questions in the Q&A, and I think there's also some weaved in through the chat, but I'm going to try to navigate those. But in the Q&A, here's a question, and please, anyone that wants to respond, please jump in. If remote learning continues post-COVID, I wonder if the panel has any thoughts if the large student housing residents in KW may provide more affordable housing options or bring rents down to supply and demand? Or are there, other things at play that may help rental prices? Sean, yeah, please feel free.
Yeah, I actually just received an email last week from a student housing provider asking who they should speak with about renting out their units to existing charities in town. So I think we will see more of that. There is a challenge with just the setup of the units and sometimes the character of the property as well, in terms of just the fit for people living in it with larger families and things like that. But definitely an exciting opportunity and hopefully something that will continue.
Yeah, great. Nadine, Mark, Andrew, anyone else want to jump in on that question? Mark?
With what Sean has said, and certainly that's something that we would consider, but it just would depend on, like, for the tenants that we serve, it would really depend on location of the building, setup of the building, what might need to be done to the building so that it can, to my previous comments about what we're trying to learn about who the tenants are that we serve and how best to serve them, as to how that building, will that building work for our model that we use. And someone mentioned at the chat that there's lots of different, models of affordable housing out there and housing providers out there and people thinking about this. So there might be, others that could chime in and speak to this and might work for them. And for us, it's possible. It just kind of depends on, the location, design of the building, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, certainly is as we're thinking about this, everything's on the table, right?
Okay. Andrew, did you want to mention something?
Yeah, and I think I'd like to add that I've heard from a few advocates that I've been speaking to about the dormitory style. Would be really, really great for those who perhaps, want some independence but can't live totally independent. I think that there's some opportunity in using some dormitory style accommodations. And then given that there's going to be a lot of vacant units, it's definitely something that should be considered. I don't know if, I believe that there's a site on University Avenue in Waterloo. Don't quote me on it, but I believe it is a dormitory style accommodation that is currently being used. If anyone can fill me in on that, if you know any more.
Don't quote you on that. You were just recorded. So
well,
no, I'm just teasing.
That's okay. That's something I've heard.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that. And Nadine, how about from your perspective? I mean, just with regards to that dormitory style student residence, is that something that you're aware of that's been considered for people that are experiencing homelessness, or some of the gentlemen that you mentioned that you interact with every day? Is that something that you think would be appealing?
Yes, it is appealing. I also go out at night and deliver meals to the homeless who are not living anywhere, who are living on the streets. There's still a few people, and they either want to come to Lot 42 or they want to go to the dorm style at the university. So that's something of interest for them.
Okay, yeah, really interesting. And thank you again for the work you do, Nadine. That's fantastic.
Thank you. No problem.
There's a question here around one concept I grapple with is rent affordability. While officially 30% of one's income is often the formula, in dollars, what would you consider affordable rent? Not attainable, but affordable for a bachelor, a 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments in this region. And I know some of you have those numbers at your fingertips because I've seen them recently.
I can jump in first just to say that I think the really important piece is how much money the individual in question has to be able to pay. So affordability in that piece is a sliding scale, and the more that we're able to have a mix of great housing organizations and opportunities out there that come in at different points along the affordability spectrum is really, really helpful, both for people who need those emergency shelters or who are maybe relying entirely on OW or ODSP, and others who are working but at minimum wage, are earning $32,000 a year. So you don't have a lot to spend there. You have $9,000 a year on rent, utilities, and other housing costs. That's not going to get you very far in our region. So I think the income is really an important variable there, and it's all about having that mix across many different housing organizations.
Yeah, Fantastic. In a moment, I'm going to ask Leilani to join us again, just as we wrapped up for the last sort of 7 minutes. But there was a question in the Q&A around options for homes in Toronto, and very timely that you asked about them, because just this morning from 9 until noon, we had our Housing Innovation Roundtable meeting and actually had someone from Options International come and present to us. So it's a very interesting model that we're going to dig into more deeply and find out, because I do think there could be a place for them locally. So thank you for that question. Thank you to all of you for those questions that you have posted, either in the chat or the Q&A. We will capture those, as I mentioned, and get back to you with, I think there's still a few that I wasn't able to get to, I'm sorry, but we do want to just ask Leilani to come back and join us. And so, you know, from what you've heard about some of the innovations that are happening in Waterloo Region, some of the organizations that the individuals on the call today, the panel, represent, is there any advice you might have for us? I mean, you know, how can Waterloo Region really, you know, make a dent in this affordable housing crisis that we're living through, and what advice would you have?
Well, I'm far too old and wise to give advice, because it's never well, it's never a good thing to do. I never give friends advice. I never give advice. But I'll say this. First of all, what I found really fascinating about the successful projects and programs that were put forward by Andrew, Nadine, Mark, and Sean, all of them to me had one really important central element, and that was the role that the community was playing in fashioning whatever the program or policy was. So really harnessing the experiences of community and trying to reflect that back through policy or programming. That is a key to success, and is actually a really key component of the human right to housing, which is where you understand that people are experts in their own lives, including people living in homelessness, because there is so much stereotyping with respect to that particular population. I'm sure Nadine could tell us harrowing stories. And it's really important that we understand that people are experts in their own lives and actually have a pretty good sense of what they need, and actually don't ask for the Cadillac or Mercedes version of anything. They tend to ask for modest things so that they can get on with their life and live a life of dignity. And so that's just one thing I note, super important for all of us to remember, and especially because those living in rental accommodation or homelessness and social housing tend to be the voiceless in most societies. And everywhere I've been in the world, I've had low-income people living in poverty and homelessness say to me, in every city I go to, they say to me, "You're the first person who's listened to me," or they say, "I feel silenced. I have no political voice." And I want to talk to Nadine afterward, because I'm engaged in a global homelessness action that I'm thinking Nadine might like to be part of. But anyway, I'll be in touch with you, Nadine, separately. One of the things, if I was going to give advice, I would say the following. I really love that the city of Kitchener has adopted a rights-based housing strategy. And I do think that that is the first step in all of this. In fact, I think you have to, as a city or a region, commit to housing as a human right before you do anything. And get familiar with what that means, because it actually means something. Andrew said it's a lens that they can use, you know, to examine any housing policy. And that's quite right. I often use, and Andrew, you might start using this too. I use the metaphor or analogy, whatever, of a sieve, that you could take any policy and pour it through the human rights sieve. And the stuff that passes through the sieve means it's not human rights friendly. And the stuff that sticks in the sieve is human rights friendly. And so you could pour a taxation bylaw. You could pour a new affordable housing project through that. And if you're familiar with what's required under the right to housing, you'll be able to determine if you're on the right track. And I think that's super important. A lot of people think of human rights as a rallying cry, like we all have the right to housing. Well, it is that. There's definitely a rallying cry, and people use it to motivate and to create momentum. But it's so much more than that. It's a set of standards. It's about non-discrimination and equality and what that looks like in housing. It's about how we spend government money. You know, there are human rights outcomes, and then there are other outcomes. It's about understanding, for example, something like homelessness is not really about individual circumstances. It's actually about the failure of governments to ensure access to adequate housing for a variety of populations who then fall into homelessness. So it provides a whole framework and a whole way of looking at governance, the role of governments, and everyday people and their role in their own lives. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. I hope that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Very, very awesome insights to leave us with, and I'll say advice or ideas. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Mark. And thank you to you, Leilani, as well for joining us today. And thank all of you, all our participants for joining. As mentioned, this is the second of a 3-part series and conversations around affordable housing and homelessness in Waterloo Region. The third and final forum in this series will be on National Housing Day, and that'll be taking place on Friday, November 20th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. So this year's event will celebrate local housing achievements, we'll share a tribute for people with lived experience, and honor the legacy of local housing champion Lynn McCauley, who passed away earlier this year. A link to register will be sent out in the follow-up email. So as mentioned at the start of this webinar, the discussion has been recorded. We've also captured the questions that were submitted, and the recording and answers to the questions and other useful links will be available soon on our website. So thank you for attending the session. As the United Nations and Leilani has stated, and we agree that housing is a basic human right. If we continue to work together, we can create caring communities where everyone thrives. Thanks very much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And get outside if you can, it's beautiful out there.